You cheated on me. Declan's enraged words pierced the air like shrapnel, shredding the fabric of our once blissful family life. I recoiled, my mind spinning as I struggled to process the vicious accusation. What are you talking about? I would never betray you, I cried out, my voice trembling with disbelief. Declan thrust a medical report in my face, his eyes blazing with hurt and betrayal. Then how do you explain this? Lila's blood type proves she can't be my daughter. My heart plummeted as I scanned the document, the stark reality of the incompatible blood types undeniable. Confusion swirled within me, kaleidoscopic shards of doubt and denial whirling in my mind. There must be a mistake, I pleaded, grasping at any shred of rationality. We need to get a second opinion or run more tests. More tests? Declan scoffed, his face twisted with contempt. So you can fabricate more lies? I don't know what pathetic games you're playing, but I want you and that bastard child out of my house tonight. The venom in his words stung like acid, searing through the very fiber of my being. I opened my mouth to protest, but my throat constricted, robbing me of speech. How could the man I loved, the father of my child, hurl such vicious insults with such callous ease? Lila's muffled sobs drifted from her bedroom, a heartbreaking counterpoint to the maelstrom engulfing our home. Mustering every ounce of composure, I turned and went to her, cradling her tiny form as she clung to me, her tears soaking my blouse. "Mommy, why is Daddy so mad?" she whimpered, her innocent eyes brimming with fear and confusion. I stroked her hair, my own tears flowing freely now. "It's going to be okay, baby. Mommy's here," I whispered, the hollow reassurance tasting bitter on my tongue. The front door slammed, signaling Declan's departure. His mother, Eloise, regarded me with undisguised contempt, her judgmental stare searing into my soul. "I always knew you were trash," she spat, her words laced with venom. "God knows what other depraved secrets you're hiding." As she stormed out, I sank to the floor, cradling Lila in my arms, her tiny body racked with sobs. The walls seemed to close in around us, the once warm sanctuary of our home now a suffocating prison of shattered trust and broken dreams. That night, as I lay awake in the darkness, my mind replayed the horrors of the day in an endless, torturous loop. Declan's accusations, Eloise's scathing condemnation, they burrowed into my psyche like parasitic worms, gnawing at my sanity, my self-worth eroding with every agonizing second. Yet, amid the maelstrom of despair, a flicker of defiance ignited within me. I was innocent, and no matter how insurmountable the odds, I would fight to prove it. For Lila's sake and for my own, I would not surrender to the shadows of doubt. As the first tentative rays of dawn seeped through the curtains, I rose from the bed, my resolution steeled. Whatever challenges lay ahead, I would face them head-on, unbowed and unbroken. This was not the end. It was merely the beginning of a hard-fought battle for truth, justice, and redemption. The next few days blurred into a waking nightmare. Declan's rage had not subsided, his accusations growing more venomous with each passing hour. Eloise fanned the flames, her hateful whispers poisoning his mind against me. "You'll never see that child again," Declan snarled, his face contorted with rage. "Not until you admit to your sordid betrayal." I pleaded, reasoned, and begged, but my words fell on deaf ears. In their eyes, I was the embodiment of sin, a deceitful serpent who had violated the sanctity of our marriage. One evening, as I was preparing Lila's dinner, Declan stormed into the kitchen, his eyes wild with fury. "Pack your things," he spat. "You and that bastard are leaving tonight." Reeling from the impact of his words, I clutched Lila protectively. "You can't do this, Declan. She's your daughter, for God's sake." His cruel laughter pierced the air, chilling me to the core. "My daughter? Don't make me laugh. That little brat is a constant reminder of your infidelity," Lila whimpered, burying her face in my embrace as Eloise glowered from the doorway. "You heard him, whore. Get out before we call the police." Tears streamed down my cheeks as I gathered our meager belongings, the weight of our shattered lives condensed into 2 battered suitcases. Lila clung to me, her tiny frame racked with sobs, her innocence shattered by the vitriol that surrounded us. As we stepped out into the night, the cold air stung my face, a harsh reminder of the cruel world that awaited us. Eloise's parting words sliced through the silence like a razor. "Don't ever show your face here again, you lying tramp." In the days that followed, we drifted from shelter to shelter, our once comfortable existence reduced to a daily struggle for survival. I reached out to Tara, my former colleague and confidant, who embraced us with open arms. "You're not alone in this, Mari," she vowed, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "I'll help you get back on your feet." True to her word, Tara secured us a modest apartment and arranged for me to interview at her marketing firm. As I sat across from the stern-faced interviewer, my heart raced with trepidation. "So, Mrs. Turner," he drawled, his gaze piercing, "care to explain this gap in your employment history?" I swallowed hard, bracing myself for the inevitable judgment. "My husband falsely accused me of infidelity and threw us out. I've been fighting to clear my name ever since." His eyebrows arched, and for a moment I feared the worst. But then, to my surprise, he nodded slowly. "I've seen my fair share of bitter divorces," he sighed. "Welcome to the team, Marielle. We could use a fighter like you." As I stepped out into the crisp morning air, a glimmer of hope flickered within me. Tara's unwavering support and the promise of a fresh start had reignited the flames of determination. I would not be cowed by Declan's vile accusations or the harsh realities that now defined our existence. No, this was not the end. It was merely the first salvo in a war for justice, dignity, and the reclamation of our lives. And I would emerge victorious, no matter the cost. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of adjustment and determination. Tara's steadfast friendship and the camaraderie of my new colleagues provided a much-needed anchor amidst the turbulence that had consumed my life. Yet, the shadow of Declan's accusations lingered, a constant specter that haunted my every waking moment. I knew that to reclaim my dignity and secure Lila's future, I needed more than moral support. I needed a legal strategy. "You're not alone in this fight," Tara assured me one evening over coffee. "I know someone who can help." A few days later, I found myself seated across from Vincent, a family lawyer whose reputation for tenacity preceded him. "Let's cut to the chase," he began, his gaze unwavering. "Declan's accusations are baseless, but proving paternity won't be easy." I nodded, steeling myself for the challenges ahead. "We'll need to demand a proper genetic test," Vincent continued, "and dig into Declan's background. Any skeletons in his closet could bolster your case." As the weeks progressed, I threw myself into the twin pursuits of work and legal preparations. Lila's well-being was my driving force, a beacon that guided me through the darkest moments. "Mommy, when are we going home?" she would ask, her innocent eyes brimming with confusion. "Soon, baby," I'd reassure her, fighting back the tears that threatened to spill. "Mommy's working on it." At the office, I poured my heart into every project, determined to prove my worth and silence the whispers that still lingered. Yet, not everyone was supportive. "Heard you're quite the little homewrecker," one colleague sneered during a team meeting. "Bet you're loving all the attention, you slut." The words sliced through me like razor blades, reopening wounds that had barely begun to heal. As tears blurred my vision, a firm hand gripped my shoulder. "That's enough, Carl." Tara's voice cut through the tension like a whip. "Unless you want a harassment suit on your hands, I suggest you keep your vile thoughts to yourself." In that moment, I realized the true depth of Tara's loyalty, a wellspring of strength that would sustain me through the darkest valleys that lay ahead. As the weeks bled into months, Vincent's investigations began to bear fruit. Financial records, travel receipts, and witness testimonies painted a damning portrait of Declan's activities, one that suggested his accusations were merely a smokescreen for his own indiscretions. "We've got him," Vincent declared, a predatory gleam in his eye. "It's time to take the fight to Declan and bury him under the weight of his own lies." A renewed sense of purpose coursed through my veins. No longer was I the victim, cowering in the shadows of doubt. I was a warrior, armed with the truth and fueled by a mother's love, a force to be reckoned with in the battle for justice and redemption. As I gazed into Lila's eyes that night, I made a silent vow. No matter the cost, no matter the sacrifices, I would emerge victorious. For her sake, and for the sake of every woman who had been wronged by the cruelty of men, I would not rest until the scales of justice were balanced once more. The deeper we delved into Declan's past, the more sordid revelations came to light. What had initially seemed like a straightforward case of mistaken paternity quickly spiraled into a labyrinth of lies and deceit. "Look at this." Vincent growled one evening, slamming a stack of financial records onto the table. Unexplained cash withdrawals, luxury hotel charges, the paper trail points to something much darker than a simple affair. I pored over the documents, my stomach churning with each damning entry. The man I had once loved, the father of my child, was rapidly transforming into a stranger, a devious manipulator capable of unimaginable betrayal. "We need to dig deeper," I replied, my voice steely with determination. "No stone can be left unturned." In the weeks that followed, we assembled a mosaic of evidence, a tapestry woven from surveillance footage, witness testimonies, and digital footprints. The picture that emerged was one of a man consumed by greed, lust, and an insatiable appetite for deception. "He's been playing us all for fools," Vincent seethed, his fists clenched. The blood-type discrepancy was just a convenient cover for his own sordid affairs. My mind reeled as the truth unraveled, each revelation more gut-wrenching than the last. Declan's protestations of fidelity had been a carefully constructed facade, concealing a web of lies that stretched back years. "That bastard," I hissed, my fingers digging into the armrests. "All this time, he's been the one betraying us." Yet, amidst the maelstrom of anger and disillusionment, a glimmer of hope emerged. With the truth laid bare, we possessed the ammunition to dismantle Declan's house of cards, to strip away the veneer of righteousness and expose him for the duplicitous charlatan he truly was. "We're going to bury him," Vincent vowed, a predatory gleam in his eye. "He'll wish he never crossed paths with us." As the days ticked by, our case grew stronger, bolstered by irrefutable evidence and sworn testimonies. Declan's web of lies was unraveling, strand by damning strand, leaving him vulnerable and exposed. One evening, as I tucked Lila into bed, her innocent eyes brimmed with curiosity. "Mommy, why are you and Daddy fighting?" I swallowed hard, struggling to find the words to explain the betrayal that had shattered our lives. "Daddy did some very bad things," I began, choosing my words carefully. "But don't worry, sweetie, Mommy's going to make things right." Her small hand caressed my cheek, her touch a balm for the rawness that still lingered. "I love you, Mommy," she whispered, her voice laced with a wisdom far beyond her years. In that moment, I knew that no matter the obstacles, no matter the sacrifices, I would emerge victorious. For Lila's sake, and for the sake of every woman who had been wronged by the cruelty of men, I would not rest until justice was served. As I rose from her bedside, a renewed sense of purpose coursed through my veins. The time for tears and self-pity was over. Now was the moment to strike, to unleash the full force of our righteous fury upon the man who had so callously shattered our lives. Declan's reign of deception was nearing its end, and I would be the one to deliver the final devastating blow that would bring him to his knees. Justice, long denied, would finally be served. The weight of the evidence against Declan was staggering, a damning mosaic of lies and infidelity that threatened to unravel the very foundation of his carefully constructed charade. Yet, as the day of reckoning approached, a sense of trepidation gnawed at the edges of my resolve. "He's not going to go down without a fight," Vincent warned, his brow furrowed with concern. "Declan's got deep pockets and a nasty vindictive streak. Brace yourself for an all-out assault." His words proved prophetic. In the days leading up to the hearing, a torrent of allegations and character assassinations flooded the media, each more vicious than the last. Sources close to the family described Marielle Turner as an unfit mother with a history of promiscuity and substance abuse. One lurid headline screamed. I recoiled in disgust, my hands trembling, as I read the litany of falsehoods and half-truths that had been woven into a nightmarish tapestry of lies. "Don't let it get to you," Tara urged, her voice a steadying force amidst the storm. "They're just trying to rattle you." Yet, as the days ticked by, the onslaught intensified, each salvo more devastating than the last. Strangers would hurl insults as I passed on the street, their words cutting deeper than any knife. "Whore! Baby killer! Declan was too good for trash like you." The venom seeped into my pores, poisoning my mind with doubt and self-loathing. There were moments when the thought of surrender, of simply retreating into the shadows and letting Declan claim his hollow victory, seemed like a merciful release. But then, I would look into Lila's eyes, those pools of innocence that had been forever tainted by the cruelty of the world, and my resolve would harden once more. I won't let him win, baby, cradling her against me. Mommy's going to make everything right again. The night before the hearing, as I lay awake in the silence of our modest apartment, a sense of clarity washed over me. This was more than just a battle for custody or vindication. It was a war, a clash of ideologies that would reverberate far beyond the confines of our fractured lives. Declan embodied the worst aspects of patriarchal arrogance, the belief that wealth and status granted him the right to lie, cheat, and discard those who dared to challenge his authority. His actions were a poisonous manifestation of the toxic masculinity that had subjugated women for centuries, reducing us to mere chattels to be used and discarded at a man's whim. But I was the embodiment of a new order, a defiant spirit that refused to be cowed or silenced. In that moment, I understood that my battle transcended the personal. It was a clarion call for every woman who had been wronged, a beacon of hope that justice could prevail even in the darkest of times. As the first rays of dawn crept through the curtains, I rose from the bed, my eyes burning with resolve. The time for doubt and self-pity was over. The hour of reckoning had arrived. With Lila's hand clasped tightly in mine, I stepped out into the world, ready to face the storm that awaited us. Declan's reign of terror was about to end, and I would be the one to deliver the killing blow that would topple his empire of lies. This was more than just a courtroom battle. It was a war for the very soul of our society, a fight to exorcise the demons of misogyny and oppression that had festered for far too long. And I, armed with the truth and fueled by a mother's love, would be the avenging angel that rained judgment upon those who dared to subjugate and abuse. The time for justice had come, and I would not rest until the scales were balanced once more. The air in the courtroom was thick with tension, each side bristling with barely contained hostility. Declan, impeccably groomed and flanked by his high-priced legal team, glowered at me from across the aisle, his eyes burning with contempt. As the proceedings commenced, his lawyers launched into a blistering assault, painting me as a morally bankrupt adulteress unfit for motherhood. Their words lashed like whips, each allegation more sordid than the last. "Your Honor, the evidence is overwhelming," the lead counsel sneered, his voice dripping with disdain. "Mrs. Turner's promiscuity and utter disregard for the sanctity of marriage have irreparably damaged this family." I steeled myself, my fingers digging into the armrests as a tidal wave of rage threatened to consume me. But then Vincent rose to his feet, his eyes glinting with a predatory gleam. "Your Honor, the defense's claims are nothing more than a smokescreen, a desperate attempt to conceal the truth about Mr. Turner's own egregious transgressions." With a deft flick of his wrist, he produced a sheaf of documents, slamming them onto the evidence table with a resounding thud. Financial records, travel receipts, surveillance footage, all pointing to a sordid web of infidelity and deceit that stretches back years. A hush fell over the courtroom as the damning evidence was presented, each piece fitting together like a macabre jigsaw puzzle. Declan's face drained of color, his carefully cultivated veneer of respectability crumbling with each revelation. "You lying sack of filth," I hissed, my voice trembling with fury. "All this time, you've been the one cheating. The blood type was just a convenient excuse to cover your own tracks." Declan recoiled as if struck, his eyes darting frantically from face to face, searching for an ally in the sea of condemnation that surrounded him. I can explain," he sputtered, his composure cracking under the weight of the evidence. "Save your pathetic excuses," Vincent snarled, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "The truth is laid bare for all to see. You're nothing but a spineless coward who hid behind false accusations to mask your own sins." As the revelations continued to unfold, each more damning than the last, the courtroom descended into pandemonium. Eloise, her face contorted in a rictus of disbelief and horror, turned on her son with a fury that would have cowed lesser men. "How could you?" she raged, her voice trembling with barely contained fury. "You've disgraced our family, brought shame upon us all with your lies and debauchery." Declan shrank back, his bravado evaporating in the face of his mother's wrath. In that moment, he was no longer the swaggering titan who had so callously shattered our lives. He was a small, pitiful creature, exposed and vulnerable to the judgment of his peers. As the gavel thundered, restoring order to the courtroom, a hush fell over the proceedings. All eyes turned towards the judge, whose weathered face betrayed a lifetime of bearing witness to the depths of human depravity. "In light of the overwhelming evidence presented," he intoned, his voice grave, "I have no choice but to rule in favor of Mrs. Turner. Full custody of the child, as well as a substantial settlement, will be awarded forthwith." A weight lifted from my shoulders, a burden that had pressed down upon me for far too long. As Declan was led away, his head bowed in shame, I turned to face the woman who had once been my mother-in-law. Eloise regarded me with a mixture of contrition and begrudging respect, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I was wrong about you," she murmured, her voice barely audible. "You're stronger than I ever gave you credit for." In that moment, I felt a pang of pity for the broken woman before me, a victim of her own toxic loyalty, blinded by her adoration for a son who had proven himself unworthy of such devotion. Extending my hand, I met her gaze with a steely resolve that brooked no argument. "Let's put the past behind us," I replied, my voice unwavering, "for Leela's sake." As our fingers intertwined, a bridge across the chasm of pain and betrayal, I knew that a new chapter was beginning. One forged in the fires of adversity and tempered by the indomitable strength of a mother's love. The battle had been won, but the war was far from over. There would be other Declans, other malignant forces bent on subjugating and oppressing those they deemed inferior. But I would be ready, a warrior armed with the truth and fueled by an unquenchable thirst for justice. No longer would I cower in the shadows, cowering from the stinging lash of misogyny and cruelty. No, from this day forward, I would stand tall and defiant, a beacon of hope for all those who had been wronged, a living embodiment of the indomitable spirit that refused to be broken. The reckoning had come, and I had emerged victorious, battered, perhaps, but unbroken and emboldened for the battles yet to come. In the aftermath of the courtroom battle, a surreal calm settled over our lives. Declan, disgraced and humiliated, had retreated into the shadows, his once formidable presence reduced to a mere specter haunting the fringes of our existence. The financial settlement, though substantial, felt like a hollow victory, a paltry compensation for the anguish and betrayal we had endured. Yet, as the dust settled and the harsh glare of public scrutiny faded, a new reality began to take shape. Eloise, her carefully constructed worldview shattered by the revelations of her son's duplicity, found herself adrift in a sea of uncertainty. Gone was the imperious matriarch who had once so vehemently condemned me. In her place stood a shell of a woman, haunted by the ghosts of her own misjudgments. "I owe you an apology," she murmured one afternoon as we sat across from each other, the weight of unspoken words hanging heavy in the air. I regarded her with a guarded expression, the wounds of her past transgressions still raw and throbbing. "For too long, I allowed my own prejudices to blind me to the truth," she continued, her voice tinged with regret. "I failed you, and more importantly, I failed Lila." A part of me yearned to unleash the torrent of pent-up fury that had festered for so long, to lash out and inflict upon her a fraction of the pain she had so callously inflicted upon us. But as I gazed into her haunted eyes, I saw not the imperious shrew who had once reveled in our suffering, but a broken woman, a victim of her own misguided loyalties and toxic ideologies. In that moment, a profound truth crystallized within me. Harboring hatred and resentment would only perpetuate the cycle of pain and oppression that had nearly destroyed us. "We've all made mistakes," I replied, my voice measured and even. "What matters now is how we move forward, as a family, for Lila's sake." Eloise's shoulders sagged, a tremulous sigh escaping her lips as a flicker of relief passed across her features. "Thank you," she whispered, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "You've shown more grace and compassion than I ever deserved." As the weeks bled into months, a fragile truce took root between us. The path towards true reconciliation would be long and arduous, paved with the shattered remnants of our fractured trust. Yet for Lila's sake we persevered, two warriors, battle-scarred and weary, united by a shared commitment to forge a better future for the innocent caught in the crossfire of our conflict. Slowly, tentatively, the walls began to crumble, and glimmers of the family we had once been started to emerge from the rubble of our shattered lives. Lila, ever resilient, took the first steps towards healing the breach, her boundless love and infectious laughter serving as a balm for the wounds that still lingered. "Grandma, come play with us," she would call out, her eyes sparkling with unbridled joy. And Eloise, her defenses worn down by the relentless onslaught of childish innocence, would inevitably acquiesce, setting aside her trepidation and embracing the moment with a cautious tenderness. In those stolen moments, I caught fleeting glimpses of the woman she might have been. A loving matriarch, untainted by the corrosive influence of prejudice and toxic masculinity. As for Declan, his presence lingered like a malignant shadow, a constant reminder of the depths of betrayal we had endured. Yet with each passing day, his hold over us weakened, his once formidable aura of invincibility eroded by the unstoppable march of time and truth. We were survivors, battle-hardened and emboldened by the fires of adversity. The chains of oppression that had once bound us lay shattered at our feet, the shackles of fear and self-doubt cast aside in favor of a newfound strength and resilience. And as I gazed out upon the world that had once seemed so hostile and unforgiving, I felt a surge of hope swell within me, a beacon of promise that illuminated the path ahead. The war had been won, but the battle for true equality and justice was far from over. There would be other Declans, other malignant forces bent on subjugating and oppressing those they deemed inferior. But we would be ready, a united front forged in the crucible of suffering and tempered by the indomitable strength of a mother's love. No longer would we cower in the shadows, cowering from the stinging lash of misogyny and cruelty. No, from this day forward, we would stand tall and defiant, beacons of hope for all those who had been wronged. Living embodiments of the indomitable spirit that refused to be broken. The reckoning had come, and we had emerged victorious. Battered, perhaps, but unbroken and emboldened for the battles yet to come. The weight of the past year's tumultuous events seemed to dissipate as I stepped across the threshold of our new home, a cozy two-story nestled in a quiet, tree-lined neighborhood. This was more than just a fresh start. It was a physical embodiment of the hard-won victories that had carried us to this point. "What do you think, baby?" I asked, turning to Lila with a warm smile. Her eyes danced with unbridled delight as she took in the spacious surroundings, her tiny feet pattering across the hardwood floors. "I love it, Mommy," she exclaimed, twirling in a whirlwind of giddy excitement. Watching her, I felt a surge of pride and gratitude wash over me. This was the life she deserved. A sanctuary untainted by the specter of Declan's betrayal, a place where she could blossom and thrive without the weight of our past struggles bearing down upon her. "I'm glad you approve," I chuckled, ruffling her hair affectionately. As the days melted into weeks, our new abode began to take on the warmth and character of a true home. Lila's vibrant artwork adorned the walls, splashes of color and whimsy that seemed to radiate a childlike joy. Yet, amidst the trappings of our fresh start, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of melancholy. The road that had led us here had been paved with pain and heartache, a crucible of suffering that had forged us into the warriors we had become. "You've come a long way, Mari," Tara murmured one evening as we sipped wine on the back patio, basking in the golden glow of the setting sun. I nodded, my gaze drifting to the horizon as memories of our shared struggles played out like a bittersweet symphony. "There were times when I didn't think I'd make it," I admitted, my voice tinged with a hard-won wisdom. "But you were there, every step of the way. I can never repay you for that." Tara's eyes shone with a mixture of pride and affection as she reached across the table, her hand enveloping mine in a warm, reassuring embrace. "You don't have to," she replied, her voice thick with emotion. "Seeing you rise from the ashes, stronger and more resilient than ever, that's all the reward I could ever want." As the weeks bled into months, I found myself rediscovering the passions and ambitions that had once defined me. With Lila's future secured and the specter of Declan's betrayal fading into a distant memory, I turned my sights towards the next chapter of my life. The marketing firm welcomed me back with open arms, and I threw myself into my work with a renewed vigor, channeling the hard-won lessons of my ordeal into a driving force that propelled me ever forward. "You've got fire in your belly, Turner," my boss remarked one day, a glint of admiration in his eye. "Keep this up, and you'll be running the show before you know it." As I climbed the corporate ladder, each rung a testament to my tenacity and resilience. A part of me couldn't help but revel in the delicious irony of it all. The very traits that Declan had sought to crush and subjugate, my strength, my independence, my unwavering spirit, were now the cornerstones of my success. Yet for all my professional triumphs, it was the quiet moments with Lila that truly brought me solace and fulfillment. Watching her blossom into a confident, vibrant young woman filled me with an indescribable sense of pride and wonder. "You're my hero, Mommy," she would whisper, her eyes brimming with adoration as she snuggled against me on the couch, our nightly ritual of story time and cuddles unfolding like a cherished tradition. In those moments, I felt a profound connection to the unbroken chain of strong, resilient women who had come before me, warriors who had fought and bled to carve out a space in a world that had sought to diminish and subjugate them. And as I gazed into Lila's innocent face, I silently vowed to honor their legacy, to be the embodiment of the unwavering spirit that refused to be cowed or broken. The years melted away, each one marked by triumphs and challenges, laughter and tears, the ebb and flow of life's rich tapestry. Yet, through it all, one constant remained, the bond between mother and daughter, forged in the fires of adversity and tempered by an unbreakable love. As the twilight of my life began to cast its gentle glow, I found myself reflecting on the winding path that had brought me to this point. The struggles, the heartache, the hard-won battles, they had all been necessary steps on a journey that had tested the very limits of my strength and resilience. And as I looked out upon the world, I saw not just the scars of my own trials, but the countless other women who had faced their own battles, their own Declans to conquer. In that moment, I knew that my story was more than just a personal triumph. It was a rallying cry, a beacon of hope for all those who had been wronged, oppressed, and subjugated. For in the end, it was not the weight of our burdens that defined us, but the indomitable spirit that refused to be crushed beneath them. We were warriors, forged in the crucible of adversity, our scars a testament to the battles we had waged and the victories we had won. And as I took my final breath, secure in the knowledge that my legacy would live on through Lila and the generations to come, I felt a sense of profound peace wash over me. The war was won, the battles had been fought, and in the end, justice and resilience had prevailed. We were the unbroken, the unbowed, and our stories would echo through the ages as a reminder of the indomitable strength of the human spirit.